Hello again, sweet darlings. Welcome back to my channel where I share weekly videos all about femininity, homemaking in the English countryside, and instinctual mothering. I want to talk to you today about how I budget for food in our home. We prioritize certain foods which might not be your preference, but bear with me here. There's some tips and tricks that I've learned over the past few years that mean that we eat the food that nourishes us and our bodies, that we enjoy eating, and all without breaking the bank. Whatever it is that you prefer to eat, or whatever your health requirements are, these methods should help you get there, where you can eat within your means and still feel like you're really treating yourself with what you put inside your bodies each day. Hello again, sweet darlings. I am here, sleeping baby on me again. Hopefully you can't hear the background noise, which is my husband planing some wood in the garage. He's making some window frames, so forgive me if that's in the background. I'll have to double check this later. But I wanted to come on and talk to you a bit about how I budget for food and our priorities as a family. And how this has changed over time, because some of you requested some homemaker budget videos, and I feel like food is a really tricky one for a lot of people. We all spend a lot of money on food, but you can come away feeling like you aren't eating particularly healthy, you're not even eating things that you like, or maybe just finding the right source or the right recipes is difficult for you. So I've come up with kind of 8 tips, I suppose, or kind of parts of a process for where we are now. But before I go into those, just to give you a little bit of detail on what we do eat. Some of you will have seen already that we eat a lot of steak. We eat a lot of red meat in this house. That's by choice. And really the reason that we came kind of full circle back to red meat is because my husband has some autoimmune issues, and we've been trying to solve those through diet, so kind of eliminating things that might be inflammatory. And a lot of people recommend that you cut out most other meats and you just focus on red meat and try to minimize obviously processed foods and all of those things which I've already mentioned. So we knew that that was a priority for us, but everybody knows steak is expensive. How are we going to afford to eat steak? So we looked at what we were spending each month on food generally before we made that switch, and then we thought, okay, so how much steak does that actually buy? How often during a month could we eat steak or another cut of red meat, like make a nice beef stew, for example? So that was kind of the priority for us, is figuring out how often we could eat that cut of meat. And then through that, we just realized that a lot of the other stuff we'd been eating didn't compare, now that I've started doing steak so often and can now cook it fairly well, I would say. We don't even crave other foods. Occasionally we'll have other things when my stepdaughters come to stay with us, because they don't want to eat steak all the time. But I have to say that I was surprised even how much I love it. It doesn't get boring night after night eating red meat. It's incredibly filling, I find, but it's not heavy. It doesn't leave you feeling heavy, you just feel full. And I have, really good levels of energy, I would say, even when I don't have much sleep. And that's only 2 coffees a day. So I have a couple of coffees, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and I don't drink tea. So kind of minimal caffeine and minimal processed foods, not too much sugar, but definitely the focus on red meat. So kind of told you the backstory there. The first thing that I think is key when you're coming up with a budget for food is just don't think about money for a second and kind of like, what you can afford and what the cheap foods are. Focus on nourishing food that you actually like, and then kind of some treats that you like. So I was cooking kind of a wide range of stuff before we made this switch, but the way that we went about figuring out what we were still gonna buy and where we were gonna spend our money was I printed out all of the recipes of the things that I had been making, and I basically laid those in front of my husband and said, right, okay, can you tell me what are your favorites? And again, I was surprised. I thought, other things maybe were his favorites, or that he'd want to eat them more often. But there was a lot of stuff that I was making that kind of I'd grown up making or I'd made at university, and they weren't complicated dishes, but you needed a sauce for them, or you needed like certain spices, or you always needed to be buying fresh vegetables. Like I made a lot of stir fries, and you always need fresh veg on hand, unless you're gonna have peas and other things frozen. So I was spending a lot of money each week kind of spur of the moment, oh, I feel like a stir fry, so I need to buy cashews, I need to buy pork, I need to buy, baby corns. Anyway, so that would be the first thing, is actually, food that leaves you feeling good. That takes some time sometimes to tune into, but I think we all kind of, have a few favorite meals. What do we actually really enjoy eating? Think about that first. And then, the process that we went through, as I said, was just printing out those recipes, trying to, at the beginning, figure out how often we wanted to eat our favorite recipes. So, you might love roast chicken, you don't want to eat it every day for most people. So kind of looking at a month, we did it by a month because we wanted to think, okay, well, we know what we're spending on food a month. How can we better spend that money? Let's spend it on food that we love. Let's spend it on food that isn't too full of processed stuff or sugar and isn't too complicated, and we don't always have to rush to the shops all the time, because that was happening for some of the recipes that I was making before. So then what we did with each of those recipes that we had decided jointly that we liked and we liked to make, I actually costed each of those recipes. So I sat down in front of the computer, I looked online where we normally order groceries from or where we go shopping, and I looked item by item, what was it going to cost me to make a roast chicken? What does it actually cost me to make a stir fry? What does it cost me to make a steak? What does it cost to make an apple pie versus a brownie versus ice cream? And again, that was a really interesting exercise. I had no idea really, like you kind of roughly know, or you think you know how much something is costing, but actually when you look at item by item what it costs you to make those things, that kind of can then put it in perspective. You can say, wow, I love this brownie that I make, but it costs me £6 to make it because I'm spending £4 just on the cooking chocolate that I need to make it, which tells you a lot about how much chocolate I put into that brownie recipe, but it is very good. So that is useful as well. Then you can see actually, out of your favorite meals, maybe it's not as expensive to make something that you love as you thought, or maybe it's quite expensive, so it's going to become more of a treat. It really depends on your budget and your priorities. So for us, obviously, steak is expensive, but it doesn't actually work out that much more expensive per serving for my husband and I than it costs me to make roast chicken, for example, for the amount of chicken that we eat. And we enjoy that and maybe save a little bit for the next day or for broth. It didn't actually work out more expensive. So we're starting to get to the point where we decide we actually can afford to eat the food that we love, i.e. steak, which, is healthy for us, more often. So by looking at, where we're spending money or where we could spend money, that starts to inform your choices about which recipes you're going to choose to make, where you're going to invest your money in key ingredients. So that kind of leads me to the third point, which is spend your money where it makes a difference. I think most people now would be on board with the fact that good quality meat makes a difference. And that's why we've ended up buying our beef from a local farm shop. It's not crazy expensive. There's another local farm shop. Sorry, I'm just waving to my husband because he's waving to me from the garage. So that's why I did a little smile, because you can see that I'm filming this. How embarrassing. Always observed. But anyway, so we looked around for a few different farm shops where we were going to get this meat. We found one where they happened to be really lovely. The price is reasonable. And I told them how much I thought I wanted to buy each month, and could we negotiate a discount, which we could. So, that's kind of a tip, which isn't really on my list. But sometimes when you get stuff in bulk from a farm shop or from a butcher, they will give you a discount if you ask. It's always worth asking. So yeah, just spend your money where you feel it's going to make the difference. For example, depending on what you love to eat, you might really want to be buying free-range chicken. Maybe you love fancy cheese. Maybe you just can't live without, beautiful pastries from your local bakers. Kind of spend it where it's going to make a difference to you. And once you kind of know what each of those meals costs, that's going to help you make a decision about where you're going to put your money and where it's really going to kind of bring you joy and hopefully good health through what you're eating. So the fourth thing is getting things in bulk if you can. Beef is one thing that we get in bulk. Our farm shop is great, so I just call them up and say, hey, Jackie, lovely Jackie, please may I have another 12 kilos of rump steak? And then she asks me when I want to pick it up, and it's as easy as that. The other things that we get in bulk is kind of through going through this process, figuring out what recipes I'm going to make regularly and what things we actually want to eat and what does it cost. I now know roughly what I need in my stock cupboard at all times, and sometimes those things are just on sale. So I'll buy a bunch of tuna, or I'll buy a bunch of baked beans, or we buy wheat grains, for example, because I make bread and I grind my own flour, which is something that if you have any questions about, do drop me a comment, because it's actually really easy and it's such a lovely thing to do. It has so much flavor when you use freshly ground flour, but that's a side point. So yeah, there's lots of things that you can get in bulk. It's always worth shopping around online and also looking at cashback sites. I know in the UK I use topcashback.com, and I've gotten some good deals in the past for some of the whole food stores, like if you love nuts or different grains, or you use a lot of rice, anything like that which will store quite well. It's worth looking online for a few different deals and shopping around for something in bulk. Just make sure that you've got somewhere to store it is the kind of caveat to that, which we're still figuring out kind of how much is reasonable to keep in reserve or kind of for emergencies versus, I don't want all of my spare space in the house taken up by, grain sacks. So there's a little bit of balancing there. I think people who are extreme preppers, they must have a lot of extra space, which I don't have. So I can't prep that far in ahead, but that's, for you to figure out. Right, number 5, I've written butcher friends. Make friends with your butcher. Be friendly to those guys. Be nice. And you never know kind of what discount you might be able to negotiate on lovely local meat. Maybe you love pork, maybe you love free-range chicken, just eggs, some nice bacon or beef. And also what we do with our butcher, who he would give it to us for free anyway. I think he would give it to anybody for free. But the beef fat, kind of the fat and like the trimmings off animals that butchers prepare, at least in the UK, a lot of that is going to waste, and they actually have to pay to dispose of it. So it's always worth asking your local butcher, have you got any like beef fat, for example, or pork fat, because it renders down into tallow or to lard if you're using pig fat. And it is the most amazing thing to cook your food in. So we switched out. I don't use any processed oils now in our house. I used to use coconut oil, which is like pretty healthy, but again, it's expensive to buy coconut oil. So now I just ask my butcher when I'm calling for the beef to say, can you save me beef fat this week? And I'm going to pick it up. And then I render it down in our air fryer, which is a quick and easy thing to do. I pour it into like some silicone molds that I have, and then I've gotten kind of my cooking oil for free, which is great. It's healthy. I know where it came from. I made it myself. And I freeze it if I have too much to spare, and I can just pull out a little block from the freezer when I need more tallow or lard. Obviously, also, if you're someone who's into natural beauty, which I'm kind of exploring at the moment myself, tallow is amazing for your skin. So if you manage to make friends with your butcher and get tallow or beef fat for free and make your own tallow, you could also be making your own kind of tallow beauty products, which, everybody swears by. And I used to use tallow on my face a lot before. Now I kind of use some oils instead, which I just found agreed with my skin better. But that's another benefit is if you go down that route of kind of animal fat for your cooking oil, then you can also make animal fat beauty products, all natural. Doubles up. So the 6th thing to kind of help you save money on your food budget is foraging / gifts. This kind of, for me, means like, kind of food that, I suppose is given to you or that you would find naturally. So I know that not everybody lives in the countryside, but, here in the UK, obviously, it's still amazing to me that they sell blackberries in the supermarket, because you could go to like most hedgerows or kind of just, well, lay-bys wouldn't be a good spot because it's by the road, but any park in the UK, they're going to have blackberry bushes, and so you can pick your fill for free and then freeze them, and you can have blackberry pies all winter long if that's what you fancied. Okay, sorry about that. My baby decided she was going to wake up and she needs the other side. Breastfeeding moms, you will empathize with me here. So yeah, forgive the breastfeeding cover, but goes with the modesty, I suppose, I was talking about in my thrifted feminine outfits video. So yeah, with foraging, in the UK you can forage blackberries. I love making elderflower champagne and elderflower jelly. It's just so lovely. And obviously elderflower cordial, which you would buy, but you can make it yourself. They're all really easy to do. There's lots of great recipes online. Also dams and plums, you can make jelly. And then in terms of like gifted food, I suppose what I mean by that is either if someone offers you, hey, I've got a box of cooking apples, do you want them? I can't make use of them. Say yes, freeze them, turn them into applesauce, which you can use later, can them, or just, eat them fresh, make a spontaneous apple pie. I think that's something that I've learned, is not turning down kind of food, even if I can't see where I'm going to make use of it right away. One year we had a neighbor give us loads and loads of plums, which I'd never made plum jelly before, but I just made loads of plum jelly that year, and then we ate it all up, and I learned to make plum cake, which I'd never made before, which was really tasty and is now one of my favorite recipes. So things like that. We've also got someone we know who has his own beehives. He helped us get our beehive, and he gave us honey, and that was lovely. Like, it was super special because it's something that he worked hard, well, the bees worked hard on it, but he harvested it, so I guess that was hard work. But yeah, basically what I'm saying is, when someone gifts you food like that, or don't be afraid to ask. Like, if you have a neighbor who's friendly and you know that they have a cherry tree or an apple tree or a pear tree, and you just see the fruit lying on the ground, say, hey, like, would you mind if I came to get some, and then I bring you like a plum cake, or I bring you, pear crumble later in the week? Would that be okay? Because often, I know especially for people who are busy or they're a little bit older, they might not have the inclination to harvest all of that fruit, and trees can get really productive and out of hand, and then they've just got to throw all of that stuff away. So they probably would be happy if you can make use of it. And I know that happened to us. We've got a neighbor down the road who has a really overproductive apple tree, and she loved it when we kept pigs, because we just threw bucket after bucket of these apples that would have just been rotting on the ground. We just gave them to the pigs, so they became delicious sausages, which is a story for another time. But anyway, yeah, gifted food, just either don't be afraid to ask if you think that something's going to waste, and yeah, if somebody wants to give you some lovely fresh fruit or rhubarb or something, even if you're not quite sure what you're going to do with it. A good example of this actually is we've got a neighbor who hunts, and he was like, do you want a couple of pheasant? And I thought, I've never done anything with pheasant before, but I didn't turn it down. So I did spend an afternoon plucking those pheasants, and then I cooked them, and they were nice. Can't say it was my favorite, but it saved me some money, and we tried something new. And I learned something in the process. I'd never prepared a pheasant before, so that was good fun. The seventh thing, which is probably much more widely accepted as a good way to save money, is meal planning. So I kind of went to the extreme with this. Again, when I was doing the budget, kind of what the meals cost, once I knew what I wanted to make, I then put that into a month calendar view. What am I making for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Which days are we going to have dessert? How much is that day going to cost me? Because then I could give that to my husband and say, look, I think that we should eat this based on what we decided are our favorite meals. This is a month view. If I make all of these things, it's going to cost us this much. And then I could say to him, but say if we added an extra couple of days of desserts, or we add in an extra couple of days of steak, this is how much it goes up by. So it just gave him that kind of comparison to make a decision about how much money we were going to spend in what area. Again, meal planning is also useful when you're buying fresh vegetables, I find, because if you're going to buy something like mushrooms and you really only need like half a pack for a recipe, it's good to then plan in that week that you're going to make something else with mushrooms so they don't go to waste. Yeah, I hate throwing food away, and we don't throw very much away because we have chickens and we have dogs, but still, it's good to make use of it and not let it go bad at the bottom of the fridge. Okay, the final thing is freeze spares, like freeze spare food, and buy things on offer. So the freeze spares, what I mean by that is I suppose it's more of a tip to be efficient in the kitchen. If you're going to bake bread, bake 2 and freeze 1. If you're going to bake a cake and you can be bothered, double the recipe, freeze 1. This was something that I really only picked up maybe about 3 or 4 months ago, I saw something online and this lady made the point, well, if you're making a cookie recipe and you just double it and you were going to be getting messy and baking anyway, then you've now got a spare batch of cookies to pull out when you don't feel like baking, which has been really great for me. It's especially lovely if someone spontaneously drops in for coffee, or they say, oh, can I come and see you tomorrow? And I can say yes, and I don't need to bake something last minute because I have a spare loaf cake in the freezer. Or sometimes my family is just extra hungrier than I anticipated, so I need to bring out another loaf of bread because we've gone through a whole loaf, in an afternoon with cheese on toast, for example, or, having French toast or whatever else we might do. So that's really helpful, kind of getting into the habit of putting a little bit of food away before you need it, so that then in an emergency or when someone's ill or you don't feel like cooking or whatever else, pick the scenario, you've got something. And the other thing is buy on offer. So once you've gone through these steps and you kind of know what food you like, you know roughly what things cost, you'll then be better prepared when you go into the supermarket to look at the things that are on offer and say, okay, well, I know that that's actually a good deal because a large roast chicken usually costs me £5 and now it's on offer for £4. And I'm going to get a couple spare because I know that I eat that every week, and I'm going to put them in the freezer while they're on offer. I know that in the UK, it's probably the same elsewhere. I know a lot of you are watching from the States, that like prices of food are going up. So, when stuff's on offer, it can be really tempting to buy it just for the sake of it. But I think knowing what you actually like, what you're going to use, what you're going to enjoy, and then just buying a bunch on offer. We did this before we went to the farm shop for our steak. We used to buy rump steak from the supermarket, and kind of once a month maybe it would be on offer, and we would just go in and buy like 10 or 12 packs of this steak and put it in the freezer and just pull it out one at a time. And that saved us, like £30 each time. So it does make a difference if you can buy the stuff that you like and would actually eat on offer. Now, obviously, you can also try new things when they're on offer. Like sometimes there might be a cut of meat that I haven't made before, so spending full price on it, like a lamb shoulder, for example, buying it for full price or buying it on offer, it makes sense to kind of try a new recipe and not spend a fortune doing so, because sometimes it's a bit hit and miss. So, if you want to be adventurous, then kind of looking in the discounted aisle or the discounted section of your supermarket to find something on offer to try can be good. Yeah, so those are kind of 8 steps. I'll try to summarize them in the description. There's nothing really that I can link to for you, but there were just a couple of things that I wanted to show you before the end. So the first thing is, again, it's more of like kind of an efficiency thing, is having a good old-fashioned like recipe book, or in my case an ugly ring binder, which has sections. So I did this when I was going through the process of what do we like to eat, what does it cost to make this recipe, and I sorted these into sections. So I've got breakfast, I've got types of dough, I've got soup, stews and casseroles, chicken, beef, other dinner recipes, and desserts. So now, because it really bothers me, I know that you can find loads of lovely recipes online, but I hate it that you have to pull out your phone to look at the recipe. I like just having a nice piece of paper in front of me that doesn't keep turning itself off, and I could just read the recipe and not be distracted by my phone. So that's one thing, just getting your recipes printed out, and either putting them in a lovely recipe book. I bought myself a recipe book recently. I want to move my recipes into here because it has, let me show you if I can. So this has already got sections in it, which is helpful. But it's got like these little cards that say like recipe, how long does it take, how many does it serve. So I do want to handwrite them out there in just a slightly smaller format, because that'll be easier for me to keep in my kitchen because that folder's a bit big. And the other thing, coming back to the beef, is this is an example. This is like a bag of the beef steak that we get from our butcher. And the nice thing as well about getting it in bulk and befriending your butcher is that they will cut it for you the way that you like. So I buy it in kilo chunks. They cut it into the kilos for me. So I buy usually 12 kilos at a time, and I get 12 nice chunks of steak. And again, through kind of estimation and experimenting, I figured out actually how much we need to eat weight-wise in steak to kind of compensate for the fact that we're not eating other meats and like to feel full. So Initially I thought, well, we're gonna need a kilo a night. We're gonna need to eat 500 grams of steak each. Really, we need more like 300 each. But the nice thing about having them in these kilo pieces is that if it's been a difficult day, or say for example my husband's had to skip lunch because he's been out, I can just make the whole kilo. I split it down the middle, or I give him a slightly larger bit depending on how I'm feeling. Sometimes I'm just not that hungry for that much steak. And again, on the nights where we might eat more steak, I find that we're not really hungry for dessert. So it kind of evens out. Like, you maybe spend a bit more money on the main meal, but you're not then having to either rush around to make a dessert or spending money to make a dessert. So, you know, again, that's why it matters to invest in the food that kind of nourishes your body, that you enjoy eating, and if possible, kind of fill yourself up with those healthier foods, and not with like the after dinner snacks or the snacks during the day. But anyway, I really hope that those kind of tips have given you a bit of insight into how we manage our household, and kind of choosing to eat a lot of red meat. There's lots of other ways that you can save money with food. I think a general principle is just doing stuff yourself that you can. So if you can make pickles, or make some fermented foods which are healthy for your gut, there's all of these added benefits obviously of making it yourself, that there's not preservatives. You learn a new skill in the process. You're not reliant on the supermarket because you can make it yourself and keep it in the fridge. So a lot of those things, they might not save you a huge amount of money, but I think they do save you a little bit, and also they bring a lot of added health benefits, kind of eating those simpler foods and making it yourself. And for us, the main ones are making my own bread, making kefir, making sauerkraut, making pickles, and as much as possible trying to make desserts and everything with kind of limited sugar, if I can, which isn't always easy, but and cooking with animal fat, so not using any processed oils. That's another big one. But yes, I hope that brings you some inspiration, and the next video I'll do is probably going to be on budgeting for clothes. But if you have any questions, I'd love to hear from you. Obviously, it's always so nice to hear from all of you. I love it when you comment to say where you're from, and to share some tips with the community as well. It's been really lovely to see those interactions. But I will be back here soon. But in the meantime, take good care, everybody, and God bless.